What's up guys, I'm Nico of CamCrunch, and this is sort of going to be a continuation from our last video where we talked all about lenses. If you guys haven't checked that out yet, I'm going to leave the link to that video in the description box down below, and I'll leave it as a card on the top right hand corner of your screen. But y'all showed me so much love on that video, so I'd first like to thank you guys for all of the likes, all of the comments that you guys gave. But without talking too much further on that video, again, you guys can check it out if you want to. Today's video is going to be all about prime lenses and zoom lenses. I briefly touched on this in the last video, but again, I'm going to go deeper into what the differences are between both the primes and the zoom lenses, what the benefits are, what the disadvantages are of each type of lens, and then I'll also talk a little bit about why I've been shooting with mostly primes as of late. Prime lenses. That's a term that you guys might have heard of already. If you guys haven't yet, what a prime lens is, it's a lens with only one single focal length, which means it can't zoom. What you see with that specific lens is what you get. This lens, for example, is a 35mm lens. It's more of a wide, normal focal length, a little bit wider than what you would see with your eye. So when you have this on your camera, you can't zoom in and zoom out. All you can do is move forward and move backward to get the image that you want. And sometimes you won't be able to get a correct image or a good image or the image that you want with a prime lens simply because you can't get close enough or you can't get far enough. But that's one of the features or one of the qualities of a prime lens. A zoom lens, on the other hand, is what the name says it is. It's a lens that has a range of focal lengths. This one, for example, is a 24-70. So you can zoom in and zoom out. This lens is actually interesting because when you're at 24mm, which is of course your widest, that's actually when it's the longest. And when you're at 70mm, when it's the most zoomed in or telephoto perspective of this lens, that's when it's small. So that's a little interesting fact about this lens right here. But again, this lens has multiple focal lengths or a range of focal lengths, again, all the way up to 24, which is wide angle, all the way up to 70, which is almost, like a telephoto lens. You get a big range of focal lengths. It's very versatile. You can shoot a lot of stuff with just this one lens, and you don't need to walk around nearly as much because, again, you can zoom in and zoom out. So that's the difference between a prime lens and a zoom lens. Again, the prime lens only has one focal length. To zoom in, you'll have to do that with your own feet. You'll have to walk closer or move farther, or you can switch out your lens for another prime lens. Whereas with a zoom lens, you get that big range, depending on the lens, of course. Some zoom lenses have smaller ranges, some zoom lenses have bigger ranges. But again, you have a range of focal lengths that you can zoom through to get different types of images with different looks. So now that you guys know the differences between the two, some of you guys might be wondering why someone would choose a prime lens over a zoom lens in the first place. And there are actually quite a few reasons for that. And so at the end, once you guys know about all of these advantages and disadvantages, you guys can figure out what lens fits your style of shooting the best. So let's first go through the zoom lens, because I think this one's easier to talk about. The first obvious advantage is the first one we talked about, which is the zoom range, right? So you have a big zoom range. You don't need to switch out lenses. This lens can do a lot more than what one prime lens can do in terms of angle of view, field of view, that sort of stuff. Another advantage, and this one may be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on the type of photographer that you are, is that this lens is cheaper than buying multiple prime lenses of the same quality. So this is a pro lens. It's a 24-70. It's a slightly older version. I believe they have a couple of newer versions, both in the f4 variant and the f2.8 variant. But again, this one is an older lens. But if you get a 24mm prime, if you get a 50mm prime, a 35mm prime, and then there isn't really a 70, but if you get like an 85mm prime, if you add all those up, that would cost more than what this one single lens would. So this, depending on what type of photographer you are, could be a cheaper option to go instead of going all prime lenses. But we'll go back into that price and that affordability a little bit later. So now that we have the zoom lens out of the way, let's talk about prime lenses. So the first advantage of a prime lens that I want to talk about, because it's probably one of my favorite advantages, is that they are a lot smaller than the zoom lens. Big difference, right? So this is a 35mm lens and this one is a 24mm lens. Now, this 24 is actually my go-to lens. I shoot probably 90% of my photography right now with this 24mm lens. Now, if I got the more pro version of this, it would be a little bit bigger. It would be maybe a little taller than this. So it does get a little bit bigger depending on the quality of lens that you have. But this one, for my uses, for what I like to do, it's very nice, very compact. It keeps my camera small and light, and I love it. I love the size. It's not too heavy, not too big. So that's the first advantage. Prime lenses are a lot smaller. Now, if we go back to our point earlier, they're really only smaller if you know what you're shooting. Because if you know what you're shooting, you won't have like 5 prime lenses with you. You'll just have maybe 1 or 2. And then that would be better than carrying even this just one big lens. I'd much rather carry these 2 smaller lenses and have one on the camera, one in my bag, than carry this larger lens. The second advantage is with the aperture, and that's because most prime lenses usually have larger maximum aperture than zoom lenses. This isn't always the case, but most of the time this is the case. This lens, for example, has a maximum aperture of f2. This one, f2.8. So this one will let in more light. This prime lens will also allow you greater flexibility in terms of depth of field. You can get slightly shallower depth of field than the zoom lens when you're talking about the 35mm focal length. You'll also get a lot of prime lenses that go up to 1.8, 1.4. Some lenses go 1.2. There are even lenses that go up to f1.1, f1, which is incredible. Now, you will get some zoom lenses that have really big apertures as well. The Sigma line, for example, they have their f1.8 zoom lenses, which is great for crop sensor cameras. Those are some of the best zoom lenses that you can get right now, actually. So those lenses, they are quite big, but they will give you that extra flexibility in terms of depth of field. And the third advantage, I'm just going to put this in the category of lens design, okay? And that's going to include things like sharpness, for example, and also the one of the reasons why the lens is so small and so light. So when you talk about a zoom lens like this, you have a very complex lens design that allows you to take sharp images all throughout the focal range. So all the way from 24 to 70, this lens is built so that it takes very sharp images all throughout that zoom range. But because the lens design is so complex, or there's so much more to this than what a prime lens is, this prime lens, because of its more simpler lens design, some people will say that it's a sharper lens at equivalent focal length and equivalent aperture values. Now, the reason why I do not want to go too in depth with this is because when you look at these two lenses, I haven't compared these side to side. This one is a 2.8 lens actually, so it doesn't have a larger maximum aperture. But my guess is that this lens is sharper than this lens at 24mm. But the reason why I don't want to go too in depth into that, or too in detail into that, is because for me at least, I've mentioned this before, but when you talk about lenses that cost this much, I have never run into a lens that isn't sharp enough for me. That doesn't seem to be the case with most lenses today. Even your kit lenses are plenty sharp. Lots of lenses are plenty sharp, especially in the good aperture ranges. But with the lens design comes other features, not really features, but qualities to a lens as well. For example, vignetting and distortion. So while this lens might be sharper, something you might want to look at with the zoom lens is, because again this is a more complex lens design, you will see sometimes that in the wide end it might have a little bit more distortion, a little bit more vignetting than what a prime lens would. So in that case, the prime lens might be more suited to whatever you're shooting. Now with modern technology these days, you can correct vignetting, you can correct distortion in Lightroom or something like that. So if you still need that versatility, then zoom lens is still the way to go. So that's basically it, guys. When it comes to prime lenses and zoom lenses, let's run through all of the advantages and disadvantages one more time. So with the zoom lens, you get flexibility in terms of the focal length, of course, and it's cheaper than buying a lot of primes. Now with a prime lens, it's not as versatile in terms of the focal length, but it is more flexible in terms of the maximum aperture. It's smaller, lighter. It's arguably got a not more superior lens design, but a lens design that's suited to that one focal length that makes it amazing at that focal length, so you can correct for distortion, vignetting, sharpness much easier with that more simpler focal length. And let's just get back to the price one more time. If you know what you're shooting, for example, I know I love this lens, this 24mm lens, and I know that I shoot with this. Even if I added this 35mm lens to the mix, since I know I shoot with these two lenses a lot, these two are cheaper than this one lens. Now if I bump this up to the pro grade lens, the pro grade versions of these lenses, then those will be more expensive if I add those up. But these ones have the same, if not better, maximum aperture than the zoom lens, and they're smaller, lighter, and cheaper. So now that we have that out of the way, I just want to talk a little bit more about why I'm currently shooting with a lot of prime lenses at the moment. That's not to say I won't shoot with the zoom lenses that I have, because they are very practical. When I'm doing a little bit more professional work, sometimes I'll bust out the zoom lenses so that I don't need to switch lenses around that much, especially when I'm not quite sure about the conditions that I'll be shooting with. But for now, I'm shooting with a lot of primes, and the main reasons why I'm doing that right now are, one, they're smaller, they're lighter. I love that when I shoot. I don't like lugging around a super heavy camera. The second reason why I like shooting with prime lenses is because it makes photography a lot simpler for me. And I previously discussed this in a video called One Single Focal Length. I'll also link that somewhere here in the description box down below. But what I mean by that is when I have this 24mm focal length on my lens, it means that I don't have to think about what focal length I'm going to shoot with, because that's all I have. That's how my images are going to appear. And with that, I can focus more on finding things to shoot. I can focus more on being creative. I can focus more on just enjoying the moment and capturing something if something pops up. Also, having that limiting focal length will push me to think outside of the box. You know, if I have something where someone would typically zoom into it to take a photo nice and tight, you know, I'd have to think of another way to take that photo. And sometimes I won't get that photo, sometimes I will. And when I do, it's a lot more rewarding, and sometimes you surprise yourself because you come up with something that you didn't think you would have been able to figure out if you had the option to not shoot that way. So for me, those are the two reasons why I love prime lenses right now, at least. But again, I will shoot with a zoom lens, and I think that in a complete kit, you might want a mixture of both prime lenses and zoom lenses. But for prime lenses, if you're going to shoot mostly primes, you really have to know what you want to shoot and how you shoot. So you might want to do a little bit more experimenting first with zoom lenses before you commit to going all primes. So yeah, this is a longer video than I thought it was going to be, but I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys got something out of it. And like the video, subscribe if you haven't yet. Stay tuned for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.